I would like to start from that point that NATO allies claim that they are ready to support Ukraine as long as it takes. So I'd like to ask you, 13 months later, what are the main challenges allies are facing providing Ukraine with military assistance?
Well, the main challenge is, of course, that this war now has become a war of attrition, which means a battle of logistics. It's about getting ammunition, weapons, supplies to the front lines. And in the beginning, we were depleting our own stocks. But of course, there's a limit for how far we can do that. So now we're also working hard to ramp up production so we can ensure that we can continue to support Ukraine. Because this is extremely important to continue to do so. It will be a tragedy for Ukraine if President Putin wins, but it will also dangerous for NATO allies. And that's my message to all allies, is that we should support Ukraine because it is in our security interest to demonstrate that President Putin doesn't win in Ukraine.
According to your assessment, how would you estimate the current situation at the battlefield and how the fight, particularly for Bakhmut, for Avdiivka, for example, affected both sides and continues to affect, I mean, Ukrainian armed forces and Russian ones?
So first of all, I think we have to once again, or I would like to once again express my admiration, how impressed I am by the quality, the courage, the determination of the Ukrainian armed forces. They have impressed the whole world. What we see is that the Russian troops, there's low morale, the equipment is often bad, training is not very impressive, leadership is not really working in many of the operations. But at the same time, what we see is that what the Russian troops lack in quality, they try to make up in quantity. So they are throwing in thousands of troops, many of them ill-equipped, ill-trained. But of course, this causes damage, and they are able to inflict also casualties on the Ukrainian side. The Russians are losing many more soldiers because they just don't have the quality of leadership equipment as the Ukrainians. But it also means that we should not underestimate Russia because they have demonstrated this will to throw in tens of thousands of new troops. For me, that's just another argument for us providing Ukraine support, helping Ukraine to liberate land and to push back the Russian invaders.
Ukraine plans, to launch the counter-offensive operation. It's announced for spring. So how would you assess its possible outcome? And in your opinion, is Ukrainian army fully equipped to launch this operation and especially to achieve the success?
So wars are by nature unpredictable. So I think no one can tell exactly now how and when this war will end or how this war will evolve throughout this year. And I also strongly believe that it is for Ukrainians who are on the ground, who have the best knowledge, to make the decisions on operational issues, on, for instance, a new offensive. Our responsibility as NATO and NATO allies is to provide Ukraine with the equipment, the ammunition, the support Ukraine needs to launch new offensives. And that's exactly what NATO allies are doing. With military support, but also with training, and also now training at higher levels, and also, of course, training to be able to use, for instance, some of the new, more modern weapons which allies are now providing, including the battle tanks.
How likely is the scenario of frozen front line on the current line, I would say, and how it would affect for the course of the war in this case?
So I'm careful speculating about how likely that scenario is. I think that our responsibility is to ensure that it doesn't happen or maximize the likelihood for that that's not the case. Because what we would like to see is, of course, Ukraine being able to liberate more land to push back the President Putin's soldiers, and then that may create the conditions for some kind of negotiations. Again, it's for Ukraine to decide what are acceptable conditions for negotiations, what are acceptable outcome, But what we know is that what happens throughout the negotiating table is inextricably linked to the strength of the battlefield. So if we want a negotiated solution where Ukraine prevails as an independent sovereign nation tomorrow, then we need to provide military support today.
And the last question, if I may, do you believe that Ukraine would be capable to liberate Crimea militarily, and are NATO allies ready to support Ukraine in this way, politically and practically?
So we have stated that we are ready to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We support Ukraine's right to self-defense or protecting Ukrainian territory. This is a right which is enshrined in the UN Charter. There's no doubt that what we see now is a war of aggression against Ukraine, and we support Ukraine's right to self-defense, and we will do that as long as it takes.